Do you remember what the world was like with gravity? How was it? Did people hate not being able to fly? I think I would have gone crazy, not being able to go up. What was walking like? Today on the Comic Book Report, the Skyward hardcover from Image Comics. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'll be looking at a series from Image Comics I've been hoping to finish for some time now. Yes, I'm going to be talking about Skyward. This was first brought to my attention by, I believe, BJ Kicks. Comics are dope. If you don't follow that channel, definitely do it. He's awesome. But he did a review for this video, I think a year or two ago. I thought it was fascinating. I read the first handful of issues, never got around to finishing it, so was really eager to get my own copy of this book. Before we dive into the collection today, though, I do want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking for your own comic book collected editions, I highly encourage you to check out their website. You can find a link in this video's description, and if you see something there you like, you can even use my discount code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to show your support for this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's comic book review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Joe Henderson and illustrated by Lee Garbett. The comics in this volume were first published by Image Comics beginning in 2018. The volume itself collects Skyward issues 1 through 15 and a short epilogue. This is the entirety of this series. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover edition with nice glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 416 pages. At this time, I'd like to issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that oversized hardcover from Image Comics, and it is just beautiful. I really love the cover they chose for this collection. I believe it's the cover for issue 15, but I just think it captures the spirit of this series quite nicely. I love the warm colors they chose. The art throughout this collection, as you'll see, is absolutely jaw-dropping, at least in my mind. I wasn't really familiar with these creators, but after reading this, I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for more properties they produced. The spine for this collection is also quite nice. I love the font they use on this white background, just looks really sleek. It is a flat spined book. It doesn't kind of bubble out. It's very flat and kind of flush, very similar to like the Firepower hardcover that Image released by Robert Kirkman. I reviewed that some time ago. Anyway, same kind of flat spine. It looks really good on a bookcase. Really dig it. The back cover is pretty sparse, but I love the look of it. I like seeing the city upside down, the blurbs kind of praising the book, a little bit about it, some information like that. I will say this does not have a dust jacket. It's just the hardcover itself. Again, kind of like that Firepower collection I reviewed some time ago, but I think it's really nice. It's really well made. Overall, very happy with it. Examining that sewn spine, I will say it's really nicely bound, but my copy is a little stiff, so I had to push the pages down a bit. A little bit of gutter loss, but nothing too bad. I hope with subsequent reading, this spine relaxes even more. But yeah, no complaints from me as far as presentation goes. I'm very impressed with how this all looks. I love these oversized hardcovers from Image Comics. Definitely eager to get some more in the future. In fact, if you have some recommendations, definitely shoot them in the comments. I'm always interested in some new great books. Jumping into the collection, we have some nice golden end pages, followed by a title page, an introduction, and then shortly after that, we're basically off to the races with issue 1. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a 15-issue series from soup to nuts, beginning to end. It's all contained in this one volume, which is a real blast for readers that like a kind of one-and-done experience. You're not getting bogged down with decades of continuity or trying to find subsequent books. You have a complete story, beginning, middle, and end, all here at your fingertips. I know they also released this book, I think across 3 trade paperback-sized collections. So again, I mentioned it earlier, but I first heard about this from BJ Kicks over at Comics Are Dope some time ago, and then I read the first handful of issues maybe the first 5-6 issues or so on, I think, Comixology Unlimited. I think it was on there, or used to be on there at a time I had like a month of that. Really loved it, read it digitally, those first couple issues. I thought it was a really fantastic premise. Essentially, if you don't know what Skyward is about, out of nowhere, one day, basically the whole planet lost its gravity. Maybe not completely, but it's definitely very, very low gravity. This, of course, just changed the entire world in a moment. We had a lot of people perish. Some just go straight into the sky, into space, and just never returning, dying, presumably. And the world has kind of had to adapt and evolve in this changing landscape. So much of the world has changed. We only know what's happening for the most part of this book in these kind of urban areas, in these major cities. And there's like kind of some classism going on. A lot of the poorer, lower classes, they're just kind of floating and trying to make their way. Some of the upper crust 1%, financially elite class of people have like magnetized shoes, and they have these environments that are more secured and protected. So very interesting, this world they build with all of this different kind of social hierarchy and kind of setup here. But anyway, the premise is really great. That's where we start. It's such a rich and interesting kind of science fiction fantasy premise. Basically, what would happen if the world lost most of its gravity overnight? What happens to the world? Most of this story takes place maybe 20 years after the event that occurred where everyone lost their gravity. The story does start the instant it happens to this one family, and then we pick up, like I said, about 20 years later. So the world has changed. It's adapted. It's evolved. And that's where we're really thrown in with these characters. And right from the jump, it is very, very fun. The art from Garbett is absolutely attention-getting. It's vibrant. It's interesting. So much of the artwork just jumps right out of the page. I think the character models are all really unique. They have kind of a cartoony, lovable quality to them that I really, really enjoyed. I also just really love the color palettes we got. We had some warmer colors, cooler colors, and everything was just so striking to me. I really enjoyed it. I love how he conveyed motion. I love seeing the depictions of this, I'm going to call it a fantasy landscape, science fiction fantasy, because we get to see so many things changed in this world they present, and I really enjoyed that. We have some beautiful splash pages, some 2-page spreads throughout this collection, and overall, I just can't commend the art quite enough. It's very, very good. At any rate, going back to the very beginning, we have a household of 3, a mom, a dad, and a young baby named Willa, a young little girl. The mom and the family is about to go to a run when this gravity stuff starts happening. The father notices like his coffee's coming out of his mug. He's starting to hover, and he runs outside to see his wife, who was going on a jog, just kind of hanging from like a telephone pole and then basically flying away, and he loses her. She goes away skyward, as they call it, where basically it's like death from above, is what we presume. He races back into the nursery and finds his daughter flying, kind of happily cooing, and we jump 20 years later, and now Willa is a grown young adult. She kind of does some courier service kind of stuff throughout this world. She carries around a gun, not really as a weapon as much as a projectile that gives her sort of thrust around this environment. If she finds herself drifting too high into the air, she can shoot up and launch herself back at the floor and things like that. She also utilizes things like fire extinguishers to achieve the same ends. And this is a woman that's very clearly adapted to this world. She's grown up in it. This is all she knows. She knows how to navigate it. But we find out that she's basically been trapped in this city. She's never seen the world. She's never gone beyond the walls of the city. We find out her dad, since losing the mother, has been a total recluse. He's kind of a scientist, a brainiac. He seems to know something about what happened to the world, but he's shut himself away. After losing his wife, he doesn't want to ever leave, and he's pretty protective of his daughter. But Willet is a free spirit. She's made her friends with this courier service and doing these other odds and ends. And basically, she wants to be free. She wants to see the world. She wants to travel. She wants to do so much more. Jumping around the storyline a bit, she ultimately wants to find favor with one of the biggest kind of industrialists of this new world, kind of the inventor of these Magna boots, and who's just become a really prominent leader during this crisis. She finds out that somehow he used to work with her dad or knows him somehow, so she kind of infiltrates this high society party. She gets loaned these Magna boots, and she's now in this upper crust party dealing with simulated magnetism like gravity for the first time in her life, and she's kind kind of gawky and awkward, never really having done this before because she's so used to just flying free for the most part. Anyway, she tries to ingratiate herself to this billionaire, but we find out as readers very early on that this guy is very insidious, definitely sinister and up to no good. We find out that he was kind of a business partner of her dad's, but he used this event to basically make a name for himself, make a fortune, give him power, and he is really in a vested interest of keeping the world this way. But we find out the dad actually believes he found a way to solve this gravity problem. So right away, we have this sense of conflict. His old business partner basically thinks the dad died a long time ago. When he finds out that he's still alive, he basically wants to end him so that there's no way that he loses his business interests. So we have this really rich, like I said, sense of conflict, and Willa realizes that she basically ignited this old feud, and now her dad's in danger. She tries to race away from the party, get out of here, and try to save her dad. It looks like she does so for the time being, before ultimately this family does get ensnared again by this billionaire. We have her father kind of sacrifice himself to save his daughter in kind of a pivotal moment in this series. Maybe 5 or 6 issues in, but this kind of really ignites her hero's journey where the dad left her his journals where he kind of details where he believes the answer is to solve the gravity problem. She has to solve these mysteries that billionaire's trying to get there first so that he can basically squash the hope of changing the world back so that he can still remain in power. So she basically creates this ragtag group with her friends, tries to travel, leave the city, and basically follow this kind of almost treasure map her dad left to solve this gravity problem. Along the way, we are again treated to this wonderful world with this brilliant science fiction premise. Pretty soon we find out things like in low gravity, based on kind of how these things adapt, the bug population has become monstrously huge and is also kind of decimating these kind of rural communities of people and livestock and animals. We have some of the other cities falling. We have these kind of militant, almost terrorist-like groups kind of forming. And basically everything around these major cities is monstrous and crazy and fully dystopian. And we have her basically trying to save these people, trying to save the day, trying to figure out what her dad has for her to save the world. And ultimately we have this faction that looks like they're on the same side before we realize that they are actually an extremist group that's trying to burn all the cities down and return it back to the people. We come to find that they're actually the disgruntled farming class under the thumb of the same billionaire we've talked about. Anyway, there's like this upcoming war. We find out this group is maybe going to destroy her home city, and so she's racing to try to find the secret to save the world against this gravity problem, while the other parts of her group go back to her hometown to try to get them prepared for this big invasion from this militant farming group. This leads us into one of the last main twists or wrinkles in the storyline, where basically she goes to where the X marks the spot, so to speak. She gets there around the same time as the billionaire, and they find out that there's this big red button, and instead of turning gravity on, it basically opens up this kind of hidden underground area, like missile silo kind of idea, and it turns out the father was involved with building this big underground city. And the idea is, even if there's no gravity under here, they have kind of a domed roof above their heads, and so for all intents and purposes, it kind of simulates this sort of suburban, everything is safe kind of environment, so unlike the world above. So we realized that there wasn't really this magic key that would turn gravity back on, as much as this community that would help survivors endure. They're safe from the elements, they're safe from the killer bugs, they're safe from going skyward, and so it is kind of a hope for the future. Within the city, we actually find the mother, who was believed to have passed away in the beginning of the first issue. We get her tale of how she survived, ultimately found her way to this community, and then fell in love with a new man who is, I believe, mayor of this new town underground. At any rate, Willa tries to pivot and go back and save her hometown. Her mother assists her to varying degrees, and we have this ultimate final confrontation with that kind of militant farming group versus Willa and these people trying to defend the city. And ultimately, we have a really, really great kind of final battle. We have Willa emerging victorious, the city saved, and we have this kind of new community in this underground city. The story basically resolves with this kind of love story that's been simmering in the background for Willa, and we also have her basically reuniting with her mom and wanting to travel the world proper and really explore what else does this amazing world have to offer after this big gravity shifting event. And so the epilogue shows her on her travels a little bit with her mom. They go to visit an ocean, things like that. The epilogue itself is pretty short, but it's a really wonderful little cap on this really quick series. And that really is the totality of the story. I did leave out maybe a couple details here and there for those that are enjoying the story for themselves or plan to, but that's kind of the basic synopsis of what you can expect with this book. Like I said, you've been flipping through with me, or watching me flip through rather, and you've been able to see the gorgeous and luscious detailed artwork that Garbett has presented in this collection. I will say the dialogue is all really organic. The characters all feel distinctive, interesting, and charming in their own way, and I have to give it up for Henderson for that. Again, I'm not familiar with this creative team, but I think that they are a powerhouse. This was such an immersive story, and I felt myself gripped from beginning to end. I will say, I think I found the beginning of the series a little more intriguing, and I think some of the direction it went, there's still definite resolution and payoff, and I think the ending was earned. I think they landed their plane sufficiently well, but I think I was more enamored with the concept at the beginning of the series than I was toward the end of it. But still a very fun science fiction read. I think the main characters were all really interesting and cool, and overall it was really fun to play in the sandbox, so to speak. This was such, again, an immersive kind of read. I felt absolutely transported to this new world, and I think that that's a beautiful marker for a great science fiction or fantasy series. I also want to say candidly, as someone who's more a superhero comic book reader, I every so often really love dipping my toe into this more independent comic book scene. Even the indie books that aren't superhero narratives, things like Invincible, Radiant Black, Irredeemable, these are all titles I really enjoy, just to name a few. But every so often it's fun to just go into like an independent comic that has nothing to do with superheroics. It's just its own fun adventure. I find for me though, it's sometimes hard to venture into this space without getting into really hard horror comics or things that really have explicit sex or nudity, which fans of this channel might know I try to stay away from in comics where I can. It makes me so delighted when I find an indie series like this that is fairly squeaky clean for all ages for the most part. I think that there's nothing really too racy in this book, which I really appreciated, and for all that being said, I think it was still intriguing, interesting. I was absolutely gripped from the first moment to the very end. It had a fantastic sense of pacing and momentum, and I just think it was really fun. This is really a cinematic kind of world as well. I would not be surprised to see this property picked up for adaptation in maybe a television or kind of film capacity. We'll see what the future holds, but honestly, even within this medium, this was such a treat. I think that this is one that might escape some people's radar, but I definitely recommend it while you can still find it in print. You can definitely find this for a pretty affordable value if you look for it online, but I really enjoyed the ride. Like I said, this was one I started once upon a time. I'd read maybe the first 5 or 6 issues like a year or two ago now, and I had always hoped to pick up this complete collection or at least to finish the series in some capacity, so I was really excited to finally get a copy of this so that I could make my way through and just see how the story resolved itself. Again, to say I was pretty shocked at the twists and turns this story took would be an understatement, but overall I really enjoyed the ride. The characters are very, like I said, charming, endearing, likable. Even the villain is almost so comically evil, you almost gotta, it's fun to just watch his exploits as well throughout this book. I do think for me, this is something that I'll remember for some time. I could absolutely see myself rereading it in the future because it's such a zippy series, only 15 issues, and it all reads really fast. And I think even as an art piece, this is a really vibrant and beautiful book just to look at. And to have in that oversized hardcover format, it's a real dream. Speaking of giant-sized insects and bugs, we have the giant butterflies that are the main means of transportation for that kind of militant farming group I mentioned earlier. Again, it's just really fascinating to see some of the twists and turns this series took. I think the overgrown bugs were definitely one of the biggest surprises as I was reading toward the middle and especially the back half of this book, where we get to see kind of these gigantic destructive dragonflies or mosquitoes, or in this case butterflies or fireflies. Really a fun facet of this world. I think it was such an interesting little piece that just added so much depth to this world. I think it kept it from feeling generic generic or bland or formulaic, because we had these quirky, kind of idiosyncratic kind of elements of this universe that Henderson and Garbett created. At any rate, like I said, I can't commend it enough for just creating such an immersive world. I don't even think it really needed more issues. I know sometimes with great stories, I'm like, oh, it left me wanting more. And I feel like with this series, it was more of, this left me really satisfied. It didn't overstay its welcome. It was quick and it was enjoyable, and honestly, that is something to commend as well. And as you can see, I flipped through here. This is the epilogue. It's, again, just a page or two of kind of those little travel adventures that Willet gets on. It's kind of a little love letter to her dad who passed away. Really, really fun. I'm so happy they included this epilogue. Like I said, I think it's a really good sort of chef's kiss at the end of this really fun run. After that, we have kind of an afterword and kind of an interview, basically, with the creators. This really kicks off our sort of extras in this volume. We have some great kind of cover art, behind the scenes, like sketches or black and white inks of different covers, things like that. Really love seeing this. I was hoping to get kind of that cover art gallery at the end, and I definitely was not disappointed. After the inks and some of those behind the scenes images, we even have kind of a script to page section at the back. This is really fun for those that like to see kind of how the soup is made, so to speak. I like seeing how it transcribes from the written page to the actual visual medium. I think for fans of that, this kind of behind the scenes like extras will be a little bit more noteworthy or exciting for maybe that group of people. I thought it was fine. I liked that it padded out the collection a bit. I think that there are more exciting extras for me, so I was happy to see a lot of the art and kind of covers, and even the interview I thought was delightful. But overall, a really strong little collection here. Not an overlong book. Like I said, it really doesn't overstay its welcome. It takes the exact amount of time needed to just present a really great science fiction fantasy story. And to ensure I don't overstay my welcome, let's go ahead and give Skyward a grade. For one of the most vivid and imaginative science fiction fantasy worlds I've ever had the pleasure of reading in the world of comics, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Henderson and Garbett's Skyward a B. This is certainly an above-average read, presented in a beautiful oversized hardcover format. I think for just general science fiction or fantasy fans, or those maybe looking for something a little bit different in the comic book medium that is pretty pleasing to most age groups, I think that this is a real hit. Will it be a classic? Is this something that's really changed my life? That might be yet to be seen, but I think for just a really enjoyable, well-paced adventure, you can do a lot worse than Skyward. This was a really fun series, so happy to finish it up. Would love to hear what you think of this series in the comments, if you've given it a read, if you find it interesting and maybe would like to after this video. Let me know all of that in the comments, or if you have those Image Comics recommendations, definitely let me know in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. This has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, that comment we talked about, and maybe check out one of my other videos on the way out. Thanks, and have a good one.